My favourite movie also happens to be my favourite book, and it's High Fidelity. The book was originally written by Nick Hornby, and the movie stars John Cusack, who plays Rob, a record store owner that's going through life trying to figure out what it's all about. And throughout the movie, he's always making a list of his top fives. He talks about his top 5 breakups, his top 5 favourite songs, and at the end he compiles a mixed tape and tells us the best way to do that and what we should do to make the greatest mixed tape and all the do's and don'ts. And I remember doing that when I was much younger. You'd sit there with your record player at night and your tape recorder, and you'd make a greatest hits tape. And that was the tape with all your favourite songs. You take your favourite bits from that record and your favourite songs from that one, you put them all together in one place. So you had them nice and compact and neat there on your tape, ready to put in your Walkman or in your car. Of course, now it's easy. You just sit there with your Spotify and tick off you make yourself a playlist up. And I think that's exactly what Porsche have been doing, because believe it or not, that's what they've done. They've made a mixed tape. And this is it. This is the car that takes all the best bits about the Taycan range and puts it all into one car. Welcome to this week's episode. Welcome to the Porsche Taycan GTS Sport Turismo. And as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we get on to this week's road test review of Porsche's new Taycan GTS Sport Turismo, it is of course that time where I ask you to make sure you subscribe to the AutoEV channel, and once you've done that, press the little bell button down below, because that way you'll be notified when our next video goes live. If you watch it and you like it, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and also make sure you do leave us some comments, good or bad. Let us know how we were doing. If you've been a supporter of the channel thus far, thank you ever so much for being along with us, and if you're new to us, stick around, see what we're like, and maybe become a subscriber and stick with us. Now, what is the Taycan GTS Sport Turismo? It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Well, like I said, it's sort of the greatest hits of the Taycan range, if you like. And then it's the GTS that's sort of the important part of it, those 3 letters, because that's the car that sits somewhere between sort of like the base lead-in Taycan and Taycan 4S, and not quite as manic turbo. It's sort of, well, possibly, we won't know until we drive it, maybe the sweet spot in the range. It sort of gives a good blend of driver involvement without too much power, but just enough to just tick those boxes that make it a real driver's Porsche. Now, we've seen the GTS nomenclature throughout Porsche's range before, in the 718 Boxster, the Cayman, the 911, the Macan, the Panamera and the Cayenne. And it does tend to be the one that people do gravitate towards and say it does offer that blend of tactility, performance and usability that Porsche has been renowned for. So is it the same in the Taycan? Well, we're going to find out. But also it's the debut of the Sport Turismo body style. Now, as you know, we test drove the Cross Turismo last year, and that's the sort of, well, the sort of all-road outback style of Taycan, where you can raise the suspension up and give you a little bit of off-road ability. But interestingly, they chose the GTS to launch the Sport Turismo body style and really hammer home that on-road dynamics as the one to have. Is it? Well, let's stick it through another AutoEV road test and find out. Now, when it comes to styling, there's no surprises here. The GTS Sport Turismo is a sort of mashup, if you like, of all the bits that we know and love about the Taycan. So it's got this sort of like the elongated shooting brake / estate body style that we saw with the Cross Turismo that we tested at the tail end of last year, but with the normal ride height of a Taycan saloon. Now, interestingly enough, the Cross Turismo has this extra 4mm in the wheelbase, whereas the Sport Turismo versions don't. They have the same wheelbase as the standard saloon Taycan. Don't ask me why. Neither is there any off-road pretense with this car, because, as I say, well, even though it's dual motor, it is very much a road biased car, especially in this GTS trim, guys. Now, you can't get the GTS as a Cross Turismo, so it's either going to be the normal Taycan saloon or this body style, the Sport Turismo, if you want a GTS. Again, emphasising its more sort of like on-road dynamic sort of nature. What do we have? Well, of course, we've got these lovely kind of cowled LED headlights that we've seen before. It's a bit more black around the car, you know, you've got this sort of this black lower half here, and again obviously you don't have that off-road design pack with the sort of like little winglets at the side that we saw in the Cross Turismo. It's just much more like the standard kind of Taycan saloon that we've seen before. The car sits on standard 20-inch alloy wheels finished in satin black, and they are wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport 4s as well, so again a real bias towards that on-road drive. Now as you come around the side, you start to notice all the little details that Porsche have done, and there's some very trick but very subtle aero in this car. This vent here just in this front bumper, which then scoops the air around these aerodynamically styled 20-inch alloy wheels, and then airflow goes back into this wheel arch here and then back out this vent here. Very clever, and as I say, very, very subtle, but of course it helps with efficiency and helps with the car slicing through the air very well and keeping everything hunkered down. Now the side sills on the GTS are this black plastic with the GTS nomenclature just under the rear doors, and they're fine. Now you can have those optioned as carbon fibre, but to be honest with you, this is a 2.5 ton car. I wouldn't be thinking about saving weight, I'd be thinking about just saving cost and not bothering with that at all, because I don't really see the point, and it's just perfectly nice the way it is. What else have you got? Well, a decent kind of door openers here, as I say, they're nice and big and usual. Flush door handles that pop out when you're ready to use it. You don't get the integrated roof rails that you do in the Cross Turismo on the car, and this lovely flowing roof line. It makes the whole car just seem a little bit lower, a little bit more sleeker in side profile. And this roof line goes out to this big extended spoiler with these nice little kind of black infills here again to help with the aerodynamics. This car's optioned with the privacy glass on the back, which is quite nice, and of course you get the frameless doors, which I really like, and then the whole thing just flows neatly into this lovely, lovely rear end. And then round the back, well, again, exactly as we saw the Cross Turismo, but a bit more aggressive looking like the rest of the car. You've got the kind of turbos kind of ribbed, no sniggering at the back there, rear sort of diffuser area if you like. Again, the matte black Taycan GTS badging, and I love this Porsche script inlaid in here. It's almost got like kind of, I don't know, sort of like kind of circuitry kind of lines running through it. I really like that, kind of emphasise the sportiness of the car. And then your big sort of like extended roof spoiler. Good looking car, and as I say, probably a little bit like the Panamera, if I'm being honest with you. In my book, it sort of suits this body style more than the saloon body style. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments down below. Now what it does show with the Cross Turismo is a decent size boot at 446 litres, and you can extend that to 1,212 litres if you knock down that split fold rear seat. Now its main rival is probably going to be something like the Audi RS6, which has a boot space of over 500 litres, but bear in mind the Taycan also has front storage of over 84 litres, so in terms of its overall capacity it is pretty much on a par. The boot itself is a good square shape, it's nice and easy to load into, it's got a relatively low loading slip, although of course there is a little drop down onto the boot floor. You've got some underfloor storage in there if you want your cables. They come in a big hefty bag which actually stores at the front, which I'll show you in a second. There's also some nice little kind of hooks at the side there for shopping bags. There's a little kind of couple of bits of cubbies down there for throwing extra bits in, and of course there's a 12-volt socket on the back there. So in terms of its practicality, it's pretty decent. So yeah, that big hefty cable bag just fits nicely in there, and then you've still got more space in there for, well, I don't know, camera bag or a little rucksack or handbag or stuff. So as I say, it's a practical Porsche. So how about rear seat space? Well, it's absolutely fine back here. In fact, if anything, it's actually really quite comfortable. I'm sat behind my own driving position, and even though when I get out of the car the seat slides back a little bit, and as everyone knows I'm 5'7", 5'8", but I've still got, even when the seat does come back a little bit, I've still got bags of legroom. There's enough foot room underneath. I've certainly got plenty of headroom. Now this car doesn't have the optional panoramic sunroof. That's a really, really trick one as well, because you can have it completely clear, or it can go opaque, or you can have it partially shaded as well. Very, very clever. Be nice to have had that in the test car, but it doesn't have it, so I can't show you it. But even so, I've got bags of headroom in here. The only thing I will say is in terms of its width, this car is optioned with what they call 4+1 seating arrangement. In other words, there's a third belt in the back here, but the centre seat area, you're never going to get anyone of any kind of great shakes on there. I mean, you might get a child on there, but they should be in a child seat. So I wouldn't bother with that. Keep it as a 4-seater, and there is plenty of space for enough, you know, for enough. Oddly enough, again, for a bespoke EV platform, there's a raised tunnel here as well, but that gives you an extra little bit of storage, in fairness. And this car's got the 4-zone climate control as well, so that's quite nice to have in the back. In terms of storage, yeah, it's okay. You've got sort of decent door bins, which will take a water bottle. There's a fold-down armrest in the middle as well, with a couple of cup holders, and obviously it gives you a blow-through facility too. And as I say, the ISOFIX points, they're nice and easy to get to. So when you put loading in a child seat, it's dead easy. They're covered when they're not in use. Now you just flip the covers off, and then the brackets are nice and easy, so you're not damaging the seats when you're trying to put a child seat in. So on the whole, if you view it as a 4-seat car, then there is more than enough space back here. And much like the rest of the car, there's no real surprises up front. It is Taycan, as we know, and dare I say, love. I absolutely adore this binnacle. I really do. It's a very classic sort of like screen that's modelled on Porsche's traditional 5-gauge binnacle, which we saw in cars like the 911 and obviously older cars such as the 944 and the 968 and such like. And it's as clear as day to use. It's so nice and easy to use, and you can configure it exactly how you want. So of course this side of here, what I can do is I can decide if I'm going to put it into media mode, where I get the media up there. Obviously there's nothing loaded at the moment, or navigation. If we have the navigation on up here, for instance, then obviously what you would have is another little map telling you your guidance here, which is fantastic. Or you can have your trip meter here, telling you your consumption as such. So all that is configurable, or it gives you access to the sport, chrono, and the drive modes. Talking of drive modes, they're mounted on the steering wheel on this nice little turny wheel, which again we've seen before on the Taycan and other Porsches, and I'll go through all that when we're obviously out driving the car. There's just enough controls on the steering. Now, what you do get, which I find really, really odd, is that when you order a GTS, you then have to order a GTS interior, but you can't have any other interior in a GTS other than a GTS interior, but you have to specify that, and it's an option. Porsche, masters of removing money from your wallet since 1950, whatever. So yeah, so it's a bit odd, but what it is a really, really nice, it's got a really nice blend of materials in here. So you've got this kind of top kind of leather bit of the dashboard here with the red stitch in this particular car. Then you've got what I would call Alcantara, but I think Porsche calls it Race Tech material, which is just nice. It's in the middle of the seats, so the seats are nice and grippy, they hold you well. The steering's the same, the steering wheel, it's just the right size, it's the right girth, it's just, it falls easily to hand, and it's this nice 3-spoke design with just enough controls on it that you need, you know, so for adjusting volume, your cruise controls on a separate column stock there, not on the steering wheel, and then obviously on this side is, you know, answering, hanging up your calls, and then for adjusting your dial. So it's just enough. And you get this nice kind of little kind of carbon sort of like inlay on the top, like you do on the doors as well. So I do like that. You get Sport Chrono on the GTS as well, so your stopwatch up there that you've been, if you've been used to Porsches in the past, you'd be familiar with the clock up there. I really like that. The touch sensitive buttons along the side of the binnacle, so for things like the lights and the fog lights on this side, and then over here you've got DSC, dynamic stability control, and your suspension modes as well. Again, I'll talk about that when we drive the car, because that's worth mentioning. But effectively, it's a bit like the Audis. You've kind of got 3 screens. You've got the binnacle here, you've got your multimedia infotainment screen there. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto standard, and that's wireless as well, which is a good thing, so that's there. And then down here you've got the climate control system. Now this is the only thing I will say, I'm not 100% sure whether this screen is necessary. The climate control is always on, so you do have that sort of, you know, you can go in to just adjust the temperature, and you do get feedback from the when you click it, which is nice, and I like that. However, the face vents, for instance, here, if you want to adjust those, they don't move, these bits don't move. If you want to adjust that, what you have to do is you have to go into here and into air conditioning, and then wait for that to come on, and then move them on here. Now I know Tesla do something similar, but the Tesla one's always on the screen, I think, whereas on the Porsche it's sort of like it's 3 steps to get into it. what would have been the harm just putting a little, you know, making these on hinges and just doing them like a normal car? I kind of feel it's complication for complication's sake, if I'm being honest with you. And that's the only other thing, as I say, I'm not sure that we did need all of these kind of screens as such. It's very nice because obviously when everything's switched off, it's a very plain and simple interior design, which I like. But there's just a little bit of overcomplication, what I find with something like that, and I'm just not sure that maybe just some physical heating and control, heating and ventilation control, sorry, would have been ample, and then, as I say, make these hinges, vents move with hinges. But there we go. Otherwise, I can't really fault it. You've got good storage. You know, you've got a couple of cup holders here, enough for my coffee flask and my water bottle. I've got a cubby in there with a wireless charging bit for my mobile. There's some storage underneath this centre console area there. There's a glove box which is adequate enough in there. Good sized door bins. You can option it with another screen in front of the passenger. I genuinely wouldn't bother. It's just overkill in my book. Keep it simple, and I think that's where Porsches really, really work. When they're this kind of simple design and simplistic sort of like nature, I think that's where they work best, because the focus is on the drive, obviously. Now let's talk about the driving position, because that's worth mentioning, because I really love these seats, and I love this kind of, say, this race tech material in the middle, because it just holds you, it just grips you. You don't move around in the seat, and you've got this perfect driving position. I can't fault it at all. You've got good visibility out the car, good access to your mirror controls, which are on the door down here, decent sized door mirrors, I say, this lovely steering wheel, and good visibility out. This car is also optioned with a head-up display as well. We'll go on to options when we talk about prices later, which is nice and handy to have, because you get your speed straight ahead of you. But as I say, everything falls nice and easily to hand. The last thing to say about is just the quality. The quality of the interior is superb. I cannot fault it. Everything lines up, everything fits nice, the plastics have a nice feel to them. When you touch a column stock, you know, it's got a nice feel, it's got a nice action, it clicks properly. When you turn the drive mode, you hit one of the buttons on the steering wheel, there's a genuine feel to it, and it just feels precise, mechanical and proper, and I really do like that. As I say, the only downside I can really label at this, other than the fact you have to pay extra to have the GTS interior on the GTS car, is this screen here. I'm just not 100% sure whether or not that is, as I say, just a bit of overcomplication. Otherwise, typical Taycan, typical Porsche, and therefore brilliant. Now the GTS comes with the Performance Battery Plus as standard, which is a gross capacity of just under 94 kilowatt hours, and that should give a WLTP range of up to 301 miles. You can also charge it at charging speeds of up to 270 kilowatts, meaning that if you can find an ultra rapid charger capable of delivering those speeds, you can go from 5% to 80% capacity in just 22 minutes. It's going to be around about 11 hours from your standard home wall box. The car comes with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger as standard, but this particular car is fitted with the optional 22 kilowatt hour onboard charger. Now, the Taycan runs 800 volt architecture, and that's quite important, and we are seeing that filter down onto sort of like some, dare I suggest, more kind of normal attainable cars such as the Hyundais and some of the Kias, and that means that the battery performance is better managed, and therefore that affects the range, its efficiency and the performance of the car. So again, a really, really clever use of technology in the Taycan. So let's talk about performance, because let's be honest, that's what this car is really about. It's the GTS, as I say, and it's how it performs out here on the road that's going to be important to anyone who's interested in potentially buying it. The car produces 517 brake horsepower. Well, I say that because remember, the Taycan produces more in launch control. So when launch control is activated, there's like an overboost facility, and that puts this car up to 598 brake horsepower, meaning that it will do the benchmark Scrabble to 60 miles an hour from rest in just 3.7 seconds. Now that's fast, of course it is. There are plenty of cars out there that this will show a very clean pair of heels to. But it's not that figure that really impresses me, if I'm being completely honest with you. The figure that impresses me is the 50 to 75 miles an hour figure. Now that's, to me, that's a real world test of acceleration. That's, you know, squeezing past a slow moving truck on a B road, or pulling out to overtake safely on a motorway or something like that, and scrambling up to 75 miles an hour from 50. This car will do it in 2.1 seconds. 2.1 seconds. That's half a second quicker than the Panamera GTS. And the Panamera has a big V8 petrol engine in it. This is a quick car, but performance is only half of the equation in terms of how the car actually feels to drive. Is it a driver's car? Well, it's a Porsche and it's a GTS, so, well, yes, of course it is. It has a sophisticated chassis that I think could be the measure of even the rear-wheel drive car which we drove last year when we tested it against Charlie Burman's Harley Davidson Live one. I said then that I thought the standard rear-wheel drive Taycan was probably the best in the range because it had a single motor, so there was nothing at the front, there was no motor at the front, so therefore the steering didn't feel too corrupted. That I felt it maybe just felt a little bit on the turbo. Now, I don't know what they've done, but it doesn't feel the same as the turbo in here, and this is a dual motor car. It has that delicacy of that rear-wheel drive car. There's a weight behind it which I really like. You know, you can feel every last little bit of lock that you put into it through your hands, and it's just a roll of the wrist that puts the car into a bend, and it is lovely, absolutely lovely. Now, part of that turn-in may be attributed to this particular car because this car has the optional rear-wheel steer pack, which does obviously, you know, sort of make the car turn in a little bit sharper. But if that's the case, then that's something I think you should tick on the options box. Ignore the carbon fibre trinkets and go for something like that, because the turn-in and the balance that this GTS has is superb, absolutely superb. I really, really like it. Other things of note that are very, very good as well are the brakes. They're all steel. They're steel brakes that are on the GTS, but they have a lovely sort of bite to them. Again, I keep coming back to this every time we drive a Taycan, but what Porsche do is they engineer it to feel like Porsche. It's not an electric car, first and foremost. It's a Porsche first and foremost, and you drive it. It doesn't drive you. Yes, there are assistance systems around the car, of course there are with every car, but it's saying no, you've got to do it, you have to do it. So you know, when you push on the pedal, you've got to, you know, you really feel every inch of travel on that pedal. You really feel every little bite that the calipers are doing now, which is interesting because initially when you first stand on the brake pedal in the Taycan, it's using regeneration from the motor. It's not actually using the brake discs at all, but it just feels like it is. It feels like a proper sports car. It feels like you're doing it, you're making this happen, and that to me is just an absolute wonderful attribute to the engineers at Porsche, that they've made it feel like that is the case, that it feels like a set of discs actually stopping the car. There are different drive modes with the Taycan. We've talked about them before, but it's worth mentioning them again because they're activated via the little toggle switch here on the steering column, and there are differences, and they are you know, they are incremental differences that you do feel as you go through them. So when you're in sort of like normal mode, which is what I've been sort of driving it in mostly, it's nice, it's easy to get on with. The ride's good, and the car comes with standard Porsche active stability management system and active suspension as well. So you've got a ride quality that's very good. It's a heavy car, as I say, it's 2.5 tons, but it doesn't feel it. There's not a huge amount of body roll, and it doesn't feel like there was a corner just recently I went into, probably a little bit too quick, and the car just settled itself in and just made a good turn. If I'd been in a 911, I've got a funny feeling I'd probably been in a bit of trouble, if I'm honest with you, but not with the Taycan. So from normal mode we go to sport, and what sport does is obviously it sharpens things up. It firms up the suspension, not ridiculously so, not in a, you know, an uncomfortable way at all. It has got a nice quality to it, and I like it. The body control is exceptional, as I say. Most of the weight is low in the chassis, so you picture into these bends, you go into sort of like a nice set of flowing corners, and it just feels right. It just settles down and just says, come on, let's do this together. And I like that. It's great. From there we go to Sport Plus. Now that's, I suppose maybe that you could class that as track in some other modes. You're not going to really track this car, don't get me wrong, but I'm probably thinking that's the bit where the suspension becomes a little bit too much, unless you're on an absolutely billiard table smooth piece of road, which I currently am, in fairness. That's when you notice the difference there, and it's good, it's okay, but I think the sweet spot in all of these ones, when you want to get a hustle on, is back a notch into sport. I think that's the one that actually has the best compromise of all. It's got firm suspension, great body control, lovely weight to the steering, really nice throttle response, without being uncomfortable or fidgety or anything like that. So that's the one I like. You can go one further into individual mode, and that is where you can go into the car's setup and set things up how you want it, and then that will be programmed into its individual mode. So when you flick into that, that's how you've set it all up. And again, it's quite nice that you've got the ability to do that. That's nice too. Throughout all this is standard fit Porsche torque vectoring system as well, where the torque is obviously distributed you know, evenly, sort of like around the car, around sort of like all four wheels, and that's certainly something that you can really tell as you know, as you apply sort of like, you know, the throttle on the car. There's certain parts where you just feel it all kind of pull itself back together again, and it's, you know, it just works. It just really, really works. Now you can go back into range mode. That's the sort of like the fifth element, if you like, where you obviously maximise the range that you're going to get out of the car. It limits the top speed, it shuts certain things down, and that's great, as I say, if you're trying to sort of like eke out every last bit of miles. But to be honest with you, the two that I really like is just normal and sport, and it's the two that I've been kind of playing around with my time with the car. The whole thing just, it really impresses me. And I think with the Sport Turismo having that slightly lower kind of ride height over the Cross Turismo, it just gives it that sort of like dynamic edge that car, I'm not saying it didn't have, but it just maybe didn't want to give you, if that makes sense. This car does. This car wants you to go on, have a go, play with it, see what you like, see what you think. And it's good. It's really good. And you know, I've kind of said it before, I'll say it again, it's one of those cars that you don't say, well, it's good for an electric car. It's just a really, really good car. You know, you add in the sort of like the blend of that comfort and refinement, and that sort of like element of that sort of, you know, sort of like the quietness that you get with an electric car makes it a fantastic grand tourer. But when you want to turn the wick up, when you want to drive it, when you want it to perform like a Porsche, it does. And by Jove, does it. It really does. It is superb. I love the way it distributes the power. I love the way it turns into a bend. I love the way the chassis just deals with imperfections in the road without having to worry you. This is a sensational motor car. Absolutely sensational motor car. Now, you can have a Sport Turismo Taycan in rear-wheel drive form, with starting from just 76,500 £100,000. If you want an all-wheel drive GTS like this one, then your starting price is £105,000. The options fitted to this test car take it to just over £118,500. Now that's not an inexpensive car, but it is on par with what we think is this car's main rival, something like, say, the Audi RS6. And it is less money than you would spend on a Sport Turismo that has one of those silly turbo badges on it. So whilst it's not exactly value for money, it's not ridiculous. And talking of the Audi RS6, that's probably this car's main rival, because obviously it's a fast, performance-orientated estate car. But there is another one, and it comes from a slightly unlikely source. You see, it comes from Porsche itself, the enemy within, if you like, because Porsche obviously offer the Panamera as a Sport Turismo, and that too comes in the GTS trim level as well, except obviously that car has a great big V8 under the bonnet. But if you're hell-bent on going full electric, then the only real rival of this sort of price performance nature is going to be Audi's e-tron S, its sporting tri-motor SUV. But if I'm being completely honest with you, that car falls way short on many levels, especially compared with the Taycan. In terms of its range and efficiency, it's not exactly good value for money. Not that the Porsche is cheap, don't get me wrong, but whilst its performance is there, it doesn't have the tactility and the finesse of something like the Taycan. So yeah, if it has to be electric, then really, this is your choice. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the Porsche Taycan GTS Sport Turismo. We like its performance, its ride and handling, its styling, the added practicality over the standard Taycan saloon, and that unmistakable Porsche DNA. We don't like the price and the price of some of the options. It loses a little bit of its off-road ability in comparison with the Cross Turismo. I'm not so keen on this red colour, if I'm honest. Yeah, and well, that's really about it. Now, if you're a regular viewer of AutoEV, or maybe you saw a road test review of the Taycan Cross Turismo at the tail end of last year, you will know that I declared it my EV of choice. It knocked the previous recipient of that award, the Jaguar I-Pace, off the top spot, because for me the Taycan Cross Turismo is it's the Swiss Army knife of cars. It's fast, it's practical, it's comfortable, it's refined, it's good looking, it's practical, and it has enough off-road ability that I would ever need. But then I drove this. Now, as I say, you can't get the GTS in Cross Turismo guise, so I would have to sacrifice that small percentile of times where I would need that just added ground clearance and off-road ability to have the on-road dynamics that the GTS Sport Turismo offers me. Now, my brother-in-law has a 911 and it's a GTS, and in many ways it is probably the perfect 911. It's not quite as manic and as raw as a GT3, and it's not quite as silly as a turbo, but it offers obviously something over the standard Carreras, and he absolutely loves it. And I would say 99% of those people who are looking for the ultimate 911, those three letters GTS probably provide it. And I think that also now applies to the Taycan. I think this is the perfect blend where the Taycan really comes to its fore. It is a sensational car. As we've said before in previous Taycan drives, what Porsche have done is they've built a Porsche first and an electric Porsche second. In fact, the only problem that I have with this car is that by the time you watch this, I'll be in France on holiday, but not with this car. I've got to give it back before I go. God, I hate this job at times. Thank you for watching another edition of AutoEV. As always, please remember, if you have enjoyed the video, make sure you do give it a thumbs up. And also, once you've done that, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you receive notification of when our next video goes live. And by doing that, you'll need to press that little bell button down there. Alternatively, if you follow us on Instagram, details of our next video and when they go live will also be on there. But we're also on Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn across all the social media platforms. And if this is your first time on AutoEV, thank you ever so much for watching. And if you want to see more of what we're about, then stick on the YouTube channel, because there is a back catalogue of road test reviews, electric icons, and trust me, there's plenty more from us to come. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching. We'll see you again soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.